I'm concerned about a cell sitting inside America today. We just caught 18 people just last month on the FBI terrorist watch list coming across our border.
Inside the war zone, U.S. Central Command says a nuclear-powered submarine is now in the Middle East.
The ongoing war in the Middle East has raised the threat of an attack against Americans in the United States here on our own soil.
Some pretty remarkable, surprising news taking place in our country and around the world. In the last 48 hours, shocking news has emerged that could literally change everything. And we're talking about this nightmare scenario involving nuclear war between Russia, the United States, and Israel. I want you guys to prepare yourself for the latest footage and insights, because if this unfolds, it could quite literally spell the end of mankind. But that's not all, guys. There's a nuclear bomb on the scene, and it's being compared to the most powerful weapon in the US arsenal. So Putin has just made a shocking move by pulling Russia out of the nuclear test ban treaty. Now, this treaty was signed by both the United States and Russia in 1996, and it's currently now in jeopardy. The situation is intensifying by the minute, with President Joe Biden unveiling a new nuclear bomb plan just last week.
A nuclear attack by North Korea against the United States or its allies or partisans or partners is unacceptable and will result in the end of, I have absolute authority as Commander-in-Chief and the sole authority to use a nuclear weapon. We will have visits to ports visits of nuclear submarines and things like that. So you need to stay tuned, because I've got headlines and footage and, of course, the breaking updates on this crisis and more that will definitely shock the world. So don't go anywhere, guys. The fate of humanity definitely hangs in the balance, and I'm here to bring you guys the truth as it unfolds. If you appreciate that information, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on a single crucial update. And this is a matter of life and death, and together, hopefully, we can navigate during these unprecedented times, guys. I really appreciate that. U.S. airstrikes on Iranian-backed targets in Syria killed at least 8 fighters. At least 8 pro-Iranian fighters were killed in U.S. airstrikes in eastern Syria. A war monitor recently indicated this on Monday, just after Washington carried out raids a day earlier in response to attacks on American forces. These attacks were issued after the FBI released several warnings regarding cities here on U.S. soil that are under high alert.
Raised the threat of an attack against Americans in the United States to a whole nother level. We assess that the actions of Hamas and its allies will serve as an inspiration, the likes of which we haven't seen since ISIS.
Texas is taking matters into its own hands, building its own border wall to address the southern border crisis, stepping up where some have argued that Joe Biden's administration has fallen short. New Yorkers have shut down the Manhattan Bridge, and it sounds like President Biden will unfreeze another $10 billion to Iran on top of the $100 billion that they already released.
There are speculations on social media that the U.S. is about to waive issue a new waiver on Iran that will allow Iran to access $10 billion. Why, when, how? Anything you can tell us?
I think you certainly shouldn't expect me to comment on speculation on social media, and I will decline to do so.
Why are we funding both sides of the war? Now, to the untrained eye, it looks like North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is preparing for World War III, but he's actually taking part in a military parade. Kim often said that he's ready to use nuclear weapons against the US, Japan, and South Korea, and he recently stated the 0 hour has come. Now, I want to ask you guys, did anyone ask you, or at least Congress, if it was okay to go to war in the Middle East? Of course not. Our government doesn't seem to care about our opinions, despite the amount of outcry and protests taking place within numerous cities at this point. The recent earthquake in Iceland has increased the chances of a volcano eruption. The Iceland Meteorological Office said just 12 hours ago that 900 earthquakes have been reported in the Iceland region since midnight. Thousands of earthquakes have occurred along an approximate 9-mile magma tunnel or dike just below the Earth's surface. The most recent earthquake activities in the area has been found along the southern portions of the magma corridor. The evacuated residents of the seaside town of Grindavik in Iceland were allowed to return home on Monday to quickly gather their belongings as hundreds of earthquakes continue to shake the region amid a significant likeness that a volcano there could erupt within days. U.S. airstrikes on Iran-backed targets in Syria killed at least 8 fighters. The toll is 8 pro-Iran fighters, including at least 1 Syrian and Iraqi national. The U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said in a statement Sunday that the U.S. carried out airstrikes against 2 Iran-linked sites in Syria in response to attacks on American troops. It was the third time in less than 3 weeks that the U.S. military targeted locations in Syria it said were tied to Iran, which supports various armed groups that Washington blames for a spike in attacks on its forces in the Middle East. Austin said that the U.S. military forces conducted precision strikes on facilities in eastern Syria used by Iran's Islamic Resolution Guard Corps, the IRGC, and Iran-affiliated groups in response to continued attacks against U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria. The strikes were conducted against a training facility and a safe house near the cities of Albu, Kamal, and Mayadeen. And the Internal State Department memo accused President Joe Biden of misinformation on Israel-Hamas's war. An Internal State Department memo that was reportedly leaked to the press accused President Biden of spreading misinformation about the Israel-Hamas war and claimed Israel's committing war crimes. Axios reported that it obtained what it's calling a scathing memo that was signed by 100 State Department and USAID employees that suggested that Biden's continued support of Israel has made him complicit in genocide as the Jewish state continues to retaliate after Hamas killed at least 1,400 civilians during the October 7th terror attack. It's been reported that some of the memo's language echoes that of the progressive activists in the United States whose anger and protests over Biden's handling of the war have crippled through the Democratic Party and created a new challenge for the president's 2024 campaign. Now, unfortunately, the memo doesn't provide specific examples of what misinformation President Biden has allegedly helped spread. Hamas kidnapped hundreds of civilians, including children and the elderly, during the October terror attack. The memo recommends that the United States government advocate for the release of the hostages, but lumped in thousands of Palestinians it said that were being held in Israel. Now, the memo, transmitted by the State Department's policy office on November 3rd, opens by noting the recent atrocities committed by Hamas on October 7th, a reference of Hamas' attack on Israel that killed 1,400 people and ultimately ignited the war. For the most part, however, the memo's author focuses on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's counterattack on Hamas in Gaza. Quote, Biden has backed Israel's response while expressing concern about humanitarian issues in Gaza. But the memo says Biden should do more to question Israel's actions. It goes on to say that those actions, which have included cutting off electricity, limiting aid, and carrying out attacks that have displaced hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, all constitute war crimes and/or crimes against humanity under international law, the memo alleges. End quote. Now, of course, the White House has not immediately responded to the request for comment yet. Addressing the memo on Monday, State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said that the dissent internally reflected the department's strengths. Quote, one of our strengths as an organization is that we have the diversity of views and that we welcome people to make their own views known. The secretary has met with a number of people from all ranks of the department, from different bureaus in the department, to hear exactly what they think about the policy, both with respect to Israel and its conflict with Hamas, and with respect to other matters, including very controversial matters. And he encourages people to provide feedback. He encourages people to speak up if they disagree. Doesn't mean that we're going to change our policy based on the disagreements. He's going to take their recommendations and ultimately make what he thinks is the best decision, the best judgment, and make his recommendations to the president about what we ought to do. End quote. And this is not all, guys. Russian media retracts a report of a retreat. 2 Russian state news agencies published alerts earlier today saying Moscow was moving troops to more favorable positions east of the Dnipro River in Ukraine, only to withdraw the information just minutes later. The highly unusual incident suggested disarray in Russia's military establishment and state media over how to report the battlefield situation in southern Ukraine. In other news, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky said that the country must brace itself for more attacks on national infrastructure as winter approaches. Ukraine's foreign minister on Monday called for an increase in recent military aid, faster work on a 12th package of sanctions against Russia, and for a decision to be made next month on the start of the negotiations on Ukraine's accession to the Eastern Union. We've got a lot going on in our world today. 2023 is ending soon and 2024 will start before you know it. And if you appreciate the updates, definitely drop a like for the video. Consider subscribing to the channel for more updates as they come. And I'll see you guys on the next one.